Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Washington. I'm proud to serve as president of Block Club Chicago. I'm also a contributing columnist for the Chicago Tribune and political analyst at ABC 7 Chicago. Welcome to Block Club Chicago, the Ballot, and our conversations with those who would be mayor. Today, we are happy to welcome Commissioner Brandon Johnson. He is a former Chicago public school teacher who serves on the Cook County Board of Commissioners, where he has served since 2018. He represents areas of the West Side and the Western suburbs. He previously was a social studies teacher at Edward Jenner Academy in Cabrini Green. He later became an organizer with the Chicago Teachers Union during the historic 2012 teacher strike. He is backed by several major labor unions, including the CTU and the local 773 and healthcare chapters of the Service Employees International Union. As a Cook County Commissioner, Brandon Johnson pushed for a measure that would make it illegal to refuse to show or rent property to people with certain criminal records. He also was behind a resolution that supported diverting money from policing in the wake of nationwide protests. Welcome, Commissioner Johnson.
Hey, thanks, Laura, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the city of Chicago today.
And you're really talking to the city of Chicago when you're talking to Block Club, because as you know, we represent the neighborhoods, and that's what makes Chicago what it is. So I wanted to just start off by saying, well, just let me know how it's going out there. I know you're spending a lot of time in front of cameras and at forums, right? I mean, I hear that the candidates are out there, sometimes more than one forum a day. You've got a debate on Channel 11 tonight.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. I mean, look, I don't believe there's anyone in this race that's working harder than me. So we've been to well over 40 house parties all over the city of Chicago. Our movement has already knocked over 100,000 doors, 1,500 individual donors online that have contributed to our movement for a better, stronger, safer Chicago. And yes, brothers working hard out here, but that's what the city of Chicago deserves in this moment. And so that's from house parties to community meetings to forums. What an incredible moment that we're in the city of Chicago, where individuals who have been either ostracized or rejected or have been invisible because our politics of old that have left many of our families behind. And so here's an opportunity where candidates who are running for the mayor of the city of Chicago get to connect in neighborhoods that they may have otherwise missed or don't travel to. So it has been quite the journey. Several churches on Sundays, right? So I'm going from churches to union halls to living rooms, from the green line to the red line. We're all over the city of Chicago, and what a remarkable city we live in.
That's absolutely, and we are indeed at a crossroads. This is really a crucial time for Chicago. So this conversation is extremely important. So speaking of neighborhoods, you live in Austin, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So that's right. So the west side of Chicago, Austin. We love the west side of the city of Chicago, particularly Austin. Austin has tremendous historical relevance to the city of Chicago. It is the largest concentration of Black people, I believe, anywhere in the country in terms of just neighborhoods. Now, that number has shifted dramatically because of the type of failed policies that have forced Black people out of.
You mean because we've lost a significant amount of Black population over the last 10 years?
No, that's absolutely right. The disinvestment in our schools, the closures of our public schools, the lack of affordable housing and public housing, all of that has contributed to the removal, quite frankly, of Black families. But again, my wife and I, 25 years, Laura, will be celebrating our anniversary in June. We're raising 3 dynamic human beings. My baby girl is Braden, she's 8. Ethan is the middle child. So I got to pray for Ethan. You know how middle children are. I'm a middle child too, by the way. So, and then he's 10, and my oldest son, he's 15. He's a freshman at Kenwood Academy. So he's a Bronco. So don't want to start a fight.
He's traveling far to school then.
Yeah, our entire family is traveling far, though we love the west side of Chicago and Austin in particular. Our 2 babies, Braden and Ethan, we dropped them off in Portage Park, so 25 minutes northwest, and then we drop Owen off 30 to 40 minutes south in Hyde Park, and primarily, Laura, because there's not a neighborhood school that offers orchestra. My children, they play the violin, the viola, and the cello, and we do not have a neighborhood structure that fully funds our neighborhood schools. And so just another dynamic and another motivation, of course, for me to become the next mayor of the city of Chicago.
Yeah, we were talking before about your children, and you exhibited some negotiating skill when you share with me your kids want a dog, and that's a pretty common dilemma for every parent that they had to face sooner or later. So your kid wanted a dog, kids want a dog. So what happened?
Yeah, so they've been pushing me on this for a little bit, like every family, So the children have been proposing multiple times. So they thought they had me and my wife cornered because they're like, look, Dad, because of all of the different challenges that we're going to have to endure because you want to run the entire city of Chicago, then if you win, we should get a dog. And I said, okay, if we get a dog, me and your mother get to name the dog. And once we told them that those were the conditions in which they could have a dog, they pretty much walked away from the table. So negotiations ended, it stopped. So we'll see what sort of clever task they'll come up with or proposals. So in the meantime, if you all can help me come up with, potential dog names as the first family of the city of Chicago, I might come back to the table and negotiate with them.
Well, that you're going to need those kinds of negotiating skills when you get to the fifth floor for sure.
No, look, and I grew up in a very large family too, Laura. So I'm, one of 10. My parents were also foster parents, so we were raised in a home with one bathroom. So I learned how to negotiate very early in life, especially when you have 4 sisters. So I think those are some unique qualities that I inherited just simply by my upbringing.
Now, we've been talking about the neighborhoods, and some folks feel that many Chicago neighborhoods have been neglected over the years, and that in many ways that Chicago is a tale of 2 cities, the downtown and then certain parts of the city that are really under-resourced. What is your neighborhood agenda? Could you just explain briefly what your agenda and your plan is for revitalizing the neighborhoods?
Yeah, you really set that up nicely. Thank you, Laura. We are living in a tale of 2 cities, and the impetus behind my run is to unite this city. And it's time for us to tell one story for the entire city of Chicago. And, without getting too far ahead of myself, though I've had the honor and privilege of serving as an elected official over these past 4 years, that was never my intention, right? I had the best job ever in the world, and that was teaching in the Chicago public schools. And for those of you who may not be familiar, I started my teaching career in Cabrini Green, where literally it captures the essence of the city of Chicago, right? Because so my students will wake up in the morning and they could see and hear and practically touch one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the entire city of Chicago, arguably one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the entire country, the world, right? And they could see it from their back windows. But out of their front windows, my students woke up to bulldozers staring them down every single day in preparation to destroy their public housing. And so for many families in the city of Chicago, they wake up chasing down this economy that's behind them while everything in front of them is crumbling. And again, that is the motivation of why I'm running to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago, because we have to retire this tale of 2 cities and usher in a better, stronger, safer Chicago under one story. And I don't believe anyone should be too poor to live in one of the wealthiest cities in one of the richest countries at the wealthiest time in the history of the world. We can shift and change that if we have the right policies in place, and that is my motivation.
So give us a couple of examples. What would be the right policies that would shift, that would help us make that shift?
Well, the first thing we have to do, and again, as someone who has taught in the public schools, the type of despair that we are experiencing throughout the city of Chicago has made us all feel less safe, right? Mm-hmm. And so the economic depravity that we've existed in for too long, and the hyper concentration of poverty in the city of Chicago, that despair has begun to essentially, without being too harsh or sounding too dramatic, but it's begun to bleed out throughout the rest of the city.
Mhm.
And part of that is because we have not invested in people, particularly young people. So one of the first things that I'm going to do as the mayor of the city of Chicago is we're going to have the most robust youth hiring program that this city has seen in a generation. I'm confident that we can double the amount of young people that we can hire, particularly between the ages of 16 and 24. And this is critical because there's a direct correlation, Laura, between youth employment and violence reduction. By investing in young people, by helping them see their value, it takes away the pain, the stain, the frustration of growing up in very traumatized neighborhoods, right?
Mhm.
The second thing that we have to do is pass the ordinance treatment, not trauma. There's an incredible movement around the country where the alternative to 911 is taking place because almost 40% of the 911 calls that come through the dispatch are mental health crises. Police officers are being forced to respond to scenarios that they are not equipped or trained or even qualified, quite frankly, to do, right? By having mental health support and clinicians on the front line to respond to, hear me now, nearly 40% of the calls that are coming through anyhow.
Mhm.
It will free up law enforcement to actually concentrate their efforts where crime is more likely to take place. And why that's important, many people know, of course, I'm raising my family on the west side of Chicago. A few years ago, Quantonio LaGreer came home from college and he was having a mental health crisis. His neighbor, Betty, came to his defense. The only equipment on that scene were guns. And so now both of them are dead. I believe they would be alive today if we would have had treatment, not trauma, right? And so that leads me to the third thing. I fought the previous administration when he shut down our mental health centers. And I have fought this administration because she has refused to reopen them. Reopening our mental health centers, at least 14 of them, where they can
Mhm.
be spread throughout the entire city of Chicago to deal with the overwhelming trauma that we're all experiencing. Let's take law enforcement out of the business, much like teachers, of being social workers, counselors, and therapists. Let's hire up clinicians to be able to provide the support that many of our families desperately need. If we can do those things right away, and I believe we can do that in the first 100 days of my administration, we are now setting ourselves up for a better, stronger, safer Chicago.
Now, you're talking a lot about dealing with some of what you're talking about is dealing with the roots of crime in terms of helping young people heal the trauma issues, and you're also talking about the impact of crime. But what about resources that would focus on the police department? There are 1,600 police vacancies right now in the police department. I know you released your crime plan yesterday, and the Sun-Times reported that they tried to get you to answer the question as to whether or not you will eliminate any of those vacancies. Do you have any plans to cut police officers or eliminate any of those vacancies?
Look, my plan is what I've said repeatedly is to invest in the neighborhoods because look, the safest cities in America all have one thing in common. They invest in people.
But police officers are people too. And,
so,
and,
so,
and many
so,
police
so,
officers feel like the department is under resourced and that they need more people are retiring at record rates. They're not being replaced. So do we need to look at bringing on more police officers to combat the crime?
Over 40% of the violence that takes place in the city of Chicago, it essentially happens in 6% of the city.
Mm-hmm.
This is not about simply looking at where you can add more personnel. This is about being smart about where we deploy personnel, right? If we already know where the crime is more likely is to take place, by having first responders that we can actually hire to respond to the trauma that is overwhelmingly occupying the 911 dispatch, that effort alone frees up law enforcement to concentrate on the areas where there's a greater propensity for crime that's going to take place. See, you're going to hear politicians that are going to constantly say, look, this is about being tough.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to explode the budget. We spend more on policing than anywhere else in the world. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we any safer using those same failed, old, tired strategies? And the answer is unequivocally no. We feel less safe now, and we're spending more. And so this is why my plan speaks to, we can promote from within, where 200 up to 200 additional detectives could be available to actually help solve the crime that exists in the city of Chicago. You know, Bertha Purnell stood next to me. She is a member of our larger community, but she's also a woman who has experienced, you know, the loss of a child, like too many people have experienced in the city of Chicago. And she has no closure. And the reason why she has no closure is because we're not solving crime in the city of Chicago. I'm saying that we have the ability within our own rank and file to promote, to encourage rank and file officers to become a part of the detective force so that families like Bertha Purnell can have some closure. And that is the first point that we lay out in my overall public safety plan. So we can deal with the immediate challenge of public safety in the city of Chicago and get at the root causes. I am the person in this race who is not only committed to telling the truth, I'm the only person telling the truth. Do you know how long it takes?
Oh, come on. So are you suggesting that your opponents are liars?
What I'm saying is, have they told you or anyone how they plan to invest in our city? Have they actually released a budget plan, given the harsh realities that we have this deficit that this administration and the previous administration have refused to tackle? I'm the only one who has put forth the budget plan, and I'm always going to tell people the truth, because the truth of the matter is, do you know how long it takes to become a police officer? Roughly 18 months. And here's how I know. As a Cook County commissioner, I've passed multi-billion-dollar budgets. We just hired 20 more additional folks to work within the Forest Preserve Police Department. Just to become a police officer or someone who is in public safety at the county level, minimally, you're talking a year, right? And so to become a police officer in the city of Chicago, it can take up to 18 months for that to happen. I would be halfway through my first term before the first set of officers arrive in the neighborhoods. So this is why I'm saying that, because they have not talked about, everybody has this grandiose plan about public transportation, about education, about housing, but no one has put forth a budget plan for the community to actually dissect, to interrogate, and to have a real honest, transparent dialogue about what a better balanced budget looks like, so that we can make critical investments into all the areas of need to have a better, stronger, safer Chicago.
So let's talk about your budget plan and your proposals for revenues, because a lot of what you've been talking about is going to be expensive. It's the city has a $16.4 billion budget, and by the way, the vast majority of that budget is in personnel. So if you're going to look for efficiencies, you've got to look at personnel. So, but where is the money coming from? What is your plan for additional revenues?
Yeah, so we are looking at those efficiencies. And one of the things that we have to do is better streamline and assess our supervisor to rank and file staff ratio. The national averages around the country is essentially 10 to 1. So for every 10 rank and file frontline workers, you have one supervisor. Ours is incredibly bloated. From what we've dissected, you know, we have found minimally $150 million in savings just simply by calibrating and streamlining our supervisory staff to ratio to fit with national averages. The fact that we have antiquated systems that do not allow us to process paperwork in a timely way, we're going to save $20 million by just simply having the right IT to do that. We've done that at the county level. There's still some work to be done, but these are areas in which we've looked at. We've also recognized that by collaborating with Cook County government, particularly around healthcare costs, mental health care costs, the type of outsourcing that government does on a regular basis, if we actually just collaborated with Cook County government, you know, we see conservatively, again, millions of dollars that we can save there. And then, of course, from our TIFs, right? The fact that TIFs have been used as a slush fund to reward the interests of corporations, while, with this administration and the previous administration have rewarded corporations while our schools and our parks have been defunded, we find comfortably $500 million there just from efficiencies and of course, making sure that our TIFs are used in an equitable way. And then to your point about revenue, when we were organizing, you remember this, Laura, when we were organizing in the city of Chicago and throughout the state of Illinois for a progressive income tax, it was the mayor that I believe that spoke to the Sun-Times, in fact. And she said that you can't continue to tax those with means. She said it's not fair to them. So in other words, the wealthy, the ultra rich should continue to pay the same tax rate as a healthcare worker or a custodian. But here's the good news about that. Even though it failed, here's the good news. Over 70%, I believe roughly 71% of Chicagoans said that the ultra rich have to put more skin in the game and pay their fair share in order to have a better.
You're talking about a poll.
No, that was the actual results from the actual ballot question.
Oh, okay.
Over 71%. This was not a poll. This was actually how Chicagoans voted. And so that's why the corporate head tax is back on the table. When Rahm Emanuel eliminated it, corporations weren't even mad about the particular tax. You know what they were frustrated by? The actual processing of paperwork. And look, I'm a public school teacher. I'm not mad at them. I didn't like doing lesson plans either. We can fix that, right? And so here's what I'm even willing to do. I'm going to even just say this out loud. Anywhere from $1 to $4 for corporations that are large on every head over 50 employees, right? I'm even saying, look, if they are committed to hiring from our neighborhoods, particularly a neighborhood like Garfield Park, that is literally described because it actually is, it's been described as a developing nation because the violence and poverty per capita reflects that of a developing nation. And again, this is one of the wealthiest economies in the entire world, right? I'm saying hire from those neighborhoods and we'll give you not only incentive, but we'll give you some relief and break on those heads, right? Because by increasing the workforce, that provides more people within the economic space to continue to contribute to our economy. And so the financial transaction tax is on the table. This is one of the rare instances in which me and Mike Bloomberg actually agree. Even Bloomberg agrees that a financial transaction tax is not just inevitable, it's necessary. We're talking about 0.002% on high volume trading that could put hundreds of millions of dollars back into our economy to invest in affordable housing, to invest in
now the experts say the financial transaction tax is sort of a myth because the exchanges do no longer operate physically in the city, and their servers and their technology could be operated from anywhere. And you can't tax a company that's not located in the city. So how would you?
But somehow, Laura, every major developed nation is doing it around the world. Mm-hmm. They're all doing it, right? Look, there's going to be people who are always going to incite fear, right? Remember when we were told that if you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that Big Mac's is going to cost you $38 and you're going to only be able to get one fry like Chris Rock, right? Remember that? And somehow you can go to McDonald's now. And not that I'm promoting you going to McDonald's. I'm trying to live a plant-based lifestyle. But I'm saying just recently, there was a sale on Big Macs. I think it was if you buy one, you get another one for $1, right? And so what I'm saying is, yes, people are going to use these type of fear-mongering tactics because the ultra-rich and large corporations continue to benefit from the subjugation and the isolation of poverty. And my budget plan speaks to these critical investments. And here's the thing, without raising property taxes. This is what I mean by individuals either lying or just simply hiding the ball behind their back. No one is telling you how they're going to do it. And you know why? Because they're going to use the same tired, failed politics that continues to leave families behind. And they're going to continue to put pressure on working people, on middle-class families to foot the bill for a return that we never get. And we're not going to do that under my administration.
And what you're referring to, basically you're suggesting they're going to continue to raise property taxes and rely heavily on property taxes. And you are pledging to not raise property taxes at all during your 4-year term.
That is correct.
Okay, let's move on. Schools is really important, and that's right in your wheelhouse. I want to get a little bit into that. WBZ has a report out that knows, as we were mentioning before, there's been a huge loss of population in the city, and that's amounted to like 100,000 students that we've lost at CPS over the last 2 years. The CPS faces a budget deficit, is projected budget deficit as much as $600 million by 2026, and the schools are currently underutilized. 22 high schools have fewer than 250 students. 95 elementary schools have fewer than 250 students. What is your plan for addressing the severe underutilization of some of these schools? Do some of them need to be closed? How do we become more efficient while also improving education?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's acknowledge how we got here, right? We got here again because of politicians and political insiders who never believed in public education. And what we don't talk enough about is the fact that Paul Vallis, as the budget director, was responsible for not contributing to the retirement security of public employees. And because of these so-called pension holidays, it has left us in the economic conditions that we're in today. Where now my administration is going to finally address the failures of Paul Vallis. Right? It was under his leadership and his
when he was budget director for Mayor Daley.
Yes, when he was a budget director, right? And so that revenue source that was providing the type of economic security throughout the city of Chicago, it was his failure. And it's why we can't go back to that style of governance, because it has harmed so many people, right? And so as a result of not just his budgetary schemes, but the fact that he created a more stratified school district, right? This hyper segregation that we are experiencing right now is the result of not just school privatization, but the explosion of application process to get into a school, right? So you literally seen an explosion of not just the privatization of public schools, you literally have been harmed by the budgetary schemes of the failures of his financial decisions, but you also saw the explosion of selective enrollment schools. And so now you literally have families, no matter whether you're in Jefferson Park or McKinley Park or Morgan Park or Gage Park, no matter where you are in this city, we are all being asked to apply for something that is free. So let's acknowledge that we didn't get here by happenstance, right?
All right.
And
So what are you going to do? What are you going to do to address?
So there are several things. One, sustainable community schools. It's a model that has demonstrated to work. When Rahm Emanuel pushed to close down, he wanted to close down, far more than the 50 schools that he closed. He was actually pushing for 150. But we saved a number of schools and we transformed them into sustainable community schools, and schools that were slated for closing because they were underutilized, right? Because children were being failed. A school like Ballot, which was on life support because it wasn't funded, it becomes a sustainable community school, and now it is a model example of how schools can run all over the city of Chicago. And what it does is there's a baseline for all of the schools. Every single school should have a social worker, counselor, a nurse, the bare minimum. But it provides additional resources because there are some dynamics that are unique to that community. So Ballot, for instance, they worked with the community organization to provide more mental health support within the school system. Within the school community. And now the enrollment is up. Parents are engaged. There's a return of vibrancy in that particular school, right? Right now, we only have 20. I'm going to expand those under my administration. Here's a second thing that we have to do. We have to actually have a real comprehensive plan for our high schools, and not just with sustainable community schools, where we can reimagine our attendance boundaries, right? Our attendance boundaries that can actually capture more students within the school communities to actually help address where there's more room there. The third thing that we have to do is remember, we have to fund our schools based upon the need, right? We have to fund our schools based upon the need. And because we're not funding our schools based upon needs, it's why we're not seeing the type of growth that these neighborhoods desperately need. But let me just keep this point before I get too far off into some technical things around education. If we're not addressing the fact that we don't have public housing, we don't have reliable transportation, we don't have affordable housing, we're not going to have communities that are flooded with working people. And that's why my education plan is more of a comprehensive plan. Remember when we were organizing to make sure that the school district actually responded to the crises of the unhoused? The fact that we have families who are showing up every single day who live in doubled up situations is another reason why we need, a new direction in this city. So with shifting our attendance boundaries, even as we provide more support for college to careers within our schools, when we say bring back the trades, this is something that I fought for as an organizer. Austin High School, west side of Chicago, Austin Polytech, the labor as well as education work together to bring that type of trade into the school. The Chicago Public Schools refuse to fund it. And so the foundation of the Chicago Teachers Union worked with the trades to actually keep that program alive. We're not as intentional as we need to be to restore confidence within our public education system. Mm-hmm. By closing the gap between graduation and job opportunities, if we can do that, it not only reimagines our public education system, it actually places people in an economic place where they can actually invest in their own communities, right? Look, there are 30,000 vacancies right now for manufacturing jobs, 30,000 of them. Mm-hmm. By creating more opportunities within our high schools where children as young as 16 can be on a pathway to having a trade, to having a CDL. You only have to be 18 to have a CDL, right? By the time you're 21, you can actually qualify for driving a larger, operate a larger vehicle. So the last thing that I'll say about our school community is that our school communities is that using our school spaces as an anchor within our communities to help, adults receive training and access to opportunities that are available through tech and through biotech. The infrastructural shift that we're going to need in this city around transportation, around roads, highways, that is a coming. It is. And we already know that Congress is preparing to send not just billions, but trillions throughout the entire country. So between green technology, biotech, repurposing the outfits of our buildings, closing the gap between graduation and the job opportunities that we can make available. That is the vision, the full economic vision for public education that includes, to the point that I just made, making sure that there's affordable housing and public housing that's accessible.
It's all related and interconnected, and you can't just focus on one aspect. Clearly, you draw a lot of your experience and your perspective from your role as a teacher, your role with the teachers union. And some voters are a little bit leery of that because they were concerned that you will be, as mayor, given the fact that you're getting so much support from the union, from all the progressive unions, that you would really be a captive of those unions and you would be taking your marching orders from them. How would you respond to that?
Well, look, first of all, I'm going to be the mayor for the entire city of Chicago. I'm going to just say that, right? Just like I'm a Cook County commissioner for not just my district. I'm a Cook County commissioner that serves the entire county of Cook. When we pass a multi-billion-dollar budget, to your point, Laura, though we know a good chunk of it is captured through personnel, we pass a budget for the entire county of Cook. But let me just also say this, that having the support of working people in this city actually speaks to the broad-based support that I have. Mm-hmm. Whether you are a teacher, a school crossing guard, a child care worker, perhaps you care for adults and seniors, you work at the county hospital, you're a custodial staff, right? These are all the individuals that make up the working class and the middle class that exists in the city of Chicago. That these workers live in every single ward.
Mhm.
In fact, you can make the argument that my candidacy is more of a reflection of the city of Chicago than any other candidate. We live in every single ward. Families rely upon public transportation, public schools, the public health department. These are the people that move our city. And I say that with some level of passion. I'm sure you can hear it. Is that I grew up with asthma. And I don't know how many folks remember the Fantas Clinic at the Cook County
Oh,
Hospital.
yes.
I stood in those long lines to see a doctor. You take the blue line to get there, right? You get in line early, you wait to see a doctor. Well, first you have to wait till the doors open, right? You wait to see a doctor, and then here's the thing, you got to come back at night to come back and get the prescription.
Mhm.
And at the Fantas Clinic, the Cook County Hospital, I saw Chicagoans there. But you know who else I saw? I saw the people who make those systems work. It's the same Cook County Hospital that Delia Ramirez, the congresswoman who supports me, is where she was born when her mother came to Chicago seeking security and a better life. The same Cook County Hospital that delivered Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, who came up from Central America, is the same Cook County Hospital that provided me with health care. And I came up, my family, from Salis, Mississippi. All right, so shout out to the Great Migration, right?
So your point is you're going to be representing the regular worker, the working person, and not the CTU. You're not going to be representing as mayor, the CTU, taking orders from them, favoring them. That's a promise.
I'm going to be taking orders from the people of Chicago. And that's why I indicated earlier that 71% of the city of Chicago said that the ultra rich have to pay their fair share. Why aren't we responding to the city of Chicago? Right. And so my work as a teacher, as an organizer, as a Cook County commissioner has always been in the interest of the everyday person. That is my lived experience. And keep in mind, many of these workers are also small business owners. Right. It's some of these individuals that have a little bit of disposable income that they start a business. There's AJ on the west side of Chicago. He and his wife have a beauty salon and a restaurant. AJ was a social worker at Westinghouse where I taught. And so he took those earnings and invested into the community. And now he's hiring other people. So we're all interconnected, whether you're just a part of the working class, I shouldn't say just a part of, as a working class person, as a middle class person, as someone who is living in poverty, who relies upon these services, individuals who are operating small businesses. Large corporations need the working class to be economically secure so that their corporations can continue to grow. In fact, I would make the argument that who better to serve the city of Chicago? Who better to align with than someone who relies upon every single dynamic of the city of Chicago, from a large business to being able to get on the green line to get downtown. You need someone with that lived experience. And this is why I'm grateful to have the support of working people.
Okay. So I have a few questions. We've taken questions from Block Club readers, and there's a couple of issues that Block Club in particular has spent a lot of time reporting on. We want to get you to weigh in on. We talked a lot about transportation. Bicycling and pedestrians have been a very big issue in the city in the last several years. There's been, unfortunately, many tragic incidents that have involved bicyclists being hit by cars because cars are blocking the lanes, pedestrians as well. What is your plan for improving bicycle safety in the city? And specifically, what would you do to make the roadways safer for bicyclists and pedestrians?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Traffic violence has just been gruesome in this city. As someone who is raising a family, my oldest son, more than my two younger children, he rides his bike on a more regular basis. And, I think about his safety all the time. So I ride my bike. I'm more for recreation and just, the ability to just get out and experience the air. I found out, Laura, what the marathon equivalent to bike riding is, and it humbled me because I ride about 8 to 10 miles a day, as long as it's 30 degrees or more. And then someone told me that the equivalent to a bike ride marathon is like 100 miles. So I don't ever brag about how many miles I ride anymore. But the gruesomeness around traffic violence is awful. And someone who relies upon public transportation, someone who bikes with my family, it is something that's top of mind. And so, a few things that we have to do. One, in order to have a more reliable transportation system, you actually need someone that's actually prepared and willing to invest in them. But some of the things that we can do right away is, first of all, the bus only lanes. We need more strips of just bus only lanes, and they have to be identifiable, and we have to complete the project. What's so frustrating about how we address public transportation and cycling in the city is just like these one-offs. And so there's incredible disruption. And so by having bus only lanes, one that would allow for buses to move through the city faster, right? Because a lot of working people rely upon public transportation, but they have to be clearly identified. Look, I drive down Chicago Avenue. I don't know if you drive down Chicago Avenue, Laura, coming from east or west, but they put a white strip and that's it. And so now you have cars competing in a lane that they believe is a second lane, and it's not. Here's the other thing that we can do. We need to give preference within our signals so that buses have preference when they move through the city of Chicago. And I know every single person who is viewing this know that when there's a car and a bus at a light, it's like the battle, right? I don't know why you would take on a bus personally, but I've seen people do it. Mm-hmm. So we have to make sure that we actually give preference, and it has to be audible too, so that we can actually hear it as well. But the overall traffic calming, like we need to actually have like real traffic features that actually bring the speed down, right? And that's something that I believe that we have to like really work towards and adjust that, especially because we are very car centric, but also making sure that our curved bike lanes that are throughout the city, that we can actually do that, we can build that. But we also really need to take a serious look at like a citywide bike grid and protective lanes within the Chicago streets. And it has to be done in an equitable way. Mm-hmm. And I've had these conversations before with individuals who bike as a mode of transportation, is that what we don't want is a structure that provides preference in areas that have greater means, right? Because here's the thing, the few, Black folks don't ride bikes as much as white folks, but we are 4 times more likely to receive a ticket for biking. Mm-hmm. And so the South and the West sides of Chicago have to have the same resources, right? And, we've seen this before when there's a particular need in the city of Chicago, that there's a prioritization of where those investments are made. And then I would say, finally, look, I use the Green Line the most. The Green Line touches the West Side and the South Side. It is one of the lines that actually has like less accessibility, right? Mm-hmm. Lack of elevators. I mean, we're not even talking about just cleanliness, but just the ability with individuals with disabilities to be able to access them, our seniors. So because the way our transportation system is structured, it's, how would I describe it? It's unnatural, which means we can rebuild it again. So in other words, because it's not like this sort of natural occurrence, it gives us the ability to actually rebuild it and actually invest in it. And so between the grids, between equity, between bus only lanes and preferences at the lights, and making sure, of course, that we are doing it again in an equitable way, I'm very much committed to that.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from one of the active community organizations on the South Side. I'm sure you're probably familiar with Rage Inglewood, and organizers there are asking, in Greater Inglewood alone, we have over 600 abandoned and vacant residential and commercial properties. 600 abandoned and vacant residential and commercial properties. What is your plan to implement in the first 180 days of your administration the hyper vacancies of properties in communities like ours?
Yeah, no, this is something that we've experienced, whether it's in Inglewood or North Lawndale. My wife and I, we're in North Lawndale quite a bit. We go to church there. It's where, we have friends there. I get my hair cut there. So we spend a lot of time there. And the vacancy is, I mean, it's actually quite, it can be demoralizing, right? And so here's where I believe we have an opportunity though. As I was indicating earlier, Laura, that the graduation date and economic opportunities, we had to close that gap. My father turned 80 yesterday, and he'd often talked about how when he came up from the South, and I'm sure you've heard these stories before too, Laura, where you can leave one job one day and get another one the next day, right? There was just a time where there was just plentiful. And so here's where I believe we have an opportunity to collaborate with the Cook County government to a larger extent. Our workforce development and providing resources within our workforce development is really how we deal with vacancy, but and housing and workforce. So putting our young people and even our younger adults onto a pathway where they can rehab the vacant homes while not only developing the on-job training experience, they're also moving towards the apprenticeship so that they can actually have their full-fledged union card so that they can work beyond those particular assignments. Working to rehab those homes, putting them back on the roll, and then incentivizing families, working people who want a pathway to home ownership to purchase those homes at a rate that is affordable. And here's what I mean by that. When my wife and I purchased our home in Austin, the home was $150,000 13 years ago. And my wife and I still needed 2 government programs to help us purchase the home. It's down payment assistance, right? And we were the richest people in our family. We had a combined income of $80,000. I was making, I don't know, what, $50,000 as a public school teacher. My wife is a public employee. She was making $30,000. And here's the thing, we have 6 degrees between the two of us. And we still needed 2 government programs to help us purchase this home. And so listening to the community, as I have all over the city of Chicago, this is what people are saying is a real good opportunity for us to revive our city. So we literally can increase our workforce as well as home ownership at the same time. And then with some of the abandoned space where there's vacancy and vacant lots, everything from building small, tiny homes and or creating more urban farms, right? So that in the meantime, as we're working to bring more businesses back into our community, working to bring grocery stores back into our community, there are opportunities to have those communities sustained. Because what would be worse than the vacancy is to place opportunity for people to work and purchase a home, but there ain't nothing around them, right? So there's no school, there's no grocery store, there's no places to shop, right? And so we have to tackle these things simultaneously. And the difference between my administration and what we have been subjected to over the course of decades now is I'm gonna listen to people. I know I tease about coming from a large family, being a middle child, but the benefit of being a middle child, you are responsible for your younger siblings. And you're also accountable to your older siblings, right? So I can literally, manage the arduous task of walking and chewing gum at the same time.
Well, how do you listen to listen to the community when you're sitting on the 5th floor of City Hall? You are a very busy mayor. You're managing a $16 billion budget. What would be your strategy, your concrete strategies for making sure that we're getting the right kind of community input? One of the other questions we've gotten a lot is around Invest Southwest, and there's a lot of people in the community that feel like the community was not consulted around some of those projects. So what specific mechanisms would you use as mayor to make sure that the community is always consulted and that you're listening to community? Yeah,
that's a good question. And whoever raised that, thank you for raising that. Look, I'm an organizer. At heart. That is my training. As much as I love teaching, I was raised around organizers. My father, as a pastor, as a public employee, working to be part of a union, being a part of the NAACP. I mean, especially during Reaganomics. I was raised in the 80s. So, my father was like, James from Good Times. I don't think that brother smiled until he had grandkids, right? So, having service to family and community, that's how I was raised, right? And so the specific mechanisms, What I'm doing now as mayor of the city of Chicago, I'm sorry, as candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago, I'm going to do that as mayor of the city of Chicago. We're going to go right into the community and we're going to listen to people. That's actually the best part about the job. Look, to sit behind a desk and look at spreadsheets all day, that's not how you build a better, stronger, safer, united city. You have to go into the neighborhoods. And then we get to work with the faith community. We get to work with our older persons, right? It's 50 of them. We won't always see eye to eye on everything, but I know this, that there are people who want a better, stronger, safer Chicago. And so I'm committed to working with community-based organizations because they're committed to my candidacy. As much as I need accountability, because that's what we all need, I also need the people of Chicago to have my back. Like, this is not like, this doesn't have to be like a tug of war. Mm-hmm. Will it be some push and pull? Yes. You know, my family, Laura, you know, we argue over the Thanksgiving menu every year and it's the same menu. You know what I'm saying? So like, my wife is an only child. So when she came into our family, she didn't know if we were arguing, fighting, or praying, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, you know, this is Chicago. We're tough. We're going to rub up against one another sometimes. But as I said before, the fifth floor, how do I say it? There'll be grits, whether you like salt or sugar, whether you like red sauce or green sauce, you know, depending on which neighborhood you live in, it'll all be available there. And so having community meetings and trusting people within my administration who will be compassionate, who will be collaborative, who will be competent. These are the skills that I possess, that we're going to work with the faith community, community-based organizations, businesses, to make sure that we are putting forth the best possible plan to move our city towards one story. And I'm committed to that.
Now, you've been pretty critical of the current person on the fifth floor. Can you name a couple things that you think she's done right, that the mayor has done right?
You know, yeah, I can. So what she did right was that she embraced the progressive movement. Look, I was a hunger striker. Mm-hmm. When Diet High School was set to close, you know, I joined that hunger strike the last 10 days because the families and the teachers and the parents, you know, their health was fading, right? So I came in to undergird and support them and help bring that through. You know, I've walked on picket lines, right? I was on buses with families who had to go downtown and beg for their school to stay open on a Tuesday night at 9 o'clock in the middle of winter. And everybody on that bus knew that school was going to close, but we went anyways because we understood that we are always better off having fought and lost versus having not fought and lost, right?
We're not talking about what you did. We're talking about the mayor. What is the mayor
done? So what I'm saying is that she embraced that movement.
Okay.
She did. She ran on the progressive platform.
But you don't believe that she is still a progressive.
She broke every single promise, Laura. She did. Mm-hmm. Environmental justice, elected representative school board, you know, fighting for nurses and social workers in schools. I mean, you just go down the list. Mm-hmm. When we were fighting for civilian oversight over policing, she took the struggle of those families who were on those buses. She took the struggle in her campaign literature 4 years ago of individuals who wanted better funded schools, who wanted mental health centers reopened, right? She took that movement and ran on that platform. That was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So I can name several things that she did right because she embraced the entire progressive platform, particularly over the last decade that we've been fighting for.
And now
she failed.
Okay, now you see yourself as the inheritor of that platform. But as other people who are supporting Chuy Garcia, Jesus Garcia, believe that he is a progressive as well. Are you guys going to split the progressive vote and neither one of you will get into the runoff because you're both catering to the same base?
I'm going to get in the runoff. Our coalition is broad because we're going to every single section of this city. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could see it, Laura. I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you've been a part of, you know, I hope this comes out the right way. You've been a part of history in this city. You know what movement looks like. You trying to call me old? I do. You saw, I was like digging down there. My communication director is shaking his head like, you're not gonna,
We've both been around.
So right, so fair enough. We both have been around. We've seen like the pendulum shift one way or the other, but we haven't seen this in a very long time. You know, when I announced in October, no one knew my name.
Mhm.
It was polling around, I don't know, people had me at 2 or 3%. You see where the recent polling is, it has, you know, essentially me and Paul Vallis at the very top. There was a poll that was just
That's
released.
one poll. There's different polls that are saying different things.
Sure, but if you're asking me how,
Hmm.
we do if we're doing it by working and building a coalition together.
Hmm.
Look, this is about what a better, stronger, safer Chicago looks like. And whether you are a traditional voter where you might vote down racial lines, whether you're more of a geographical voter, maybe you're an issue-based voter, the fact of the matter is, from Delia Ramirez to Jonathan Jackson, right? Here's the thing. Dr. King said something, you know, it's Black History Month, so you got to quote Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. at least once, right? But he made a very, very profound statement at a union hall over 50 years ago. He said that if the labor rights movement and the civil rights movement were to ever collide, I'm paraphrasing, what enormous potential it would have.
Hmm.
We are a manifestation of the dreams of our ancestors. So from the faith community to a son of a civil rights icon, to immigrants, to labor, to just everyday people who want to see a better, stronger, safer Chicago, that is what has captured the imagination of voters in this city. And I'm confident that no matter where you are, Jefferson Park to McKinley Park, West Side, South Side, wherever you are, North Side, Southwest, Southeast, that a better, stronger, safer Chicago is possible when you actually have a set of values that the people of Chicago can get around, and that we retire the old way of doing things and ushering in something better, refreshed, and revived. And that's how we're going to do it. And so far, it's looking pretty good, Laura.
Well, we shall see. I will be watching. I have one more question, and this is a very Chicago question. We're in the middle of winter, and right now we haven't seen any snow lately, but we're going to get that snow. So are you pro dibs or anti dibs?
I have a driveway, Laura.
So that means pro.
That I don't have to worry about it too much. Listen, all I'm saying is if you work really hard to shovel a spot, I would hope that when I'm the mayor of the city of Chicago, that the people of Chicago will work together with me so that we can plow the sidewalks and plow the streets so people don't have to set up dibs. How about that?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's one more way you're gonna bring the city together, right? Through dibs.
We're going to shovel ourselves all the way to economic justice.
Well, we just have a minute or two left. Any closing thoughts you have before we go?
Well, just again, thank you for you taking time out, to work with all of our campaigns to hear the reflection of people who, believe that they have something to offer. But I really want to thank the city of Chicago. This is a very delicate moment in our city's history. As someone who was raised in a family in the city of Chicago, and particularly on the West Side, we know what the day-to-day experiences are for families. We've had to cover our children, my wife and I, multiple times because of gunshots that have rang outside our front door. We've had to change a window from one of the bullets that have come through our home. I don't believe there's anyone in this race that has greater incentive for the city of Chicago to work than someone who was raised in a family that relies upon public education, public transportation. We rely upon, all of our healthcare systems, right? And so know that you're going to have in me as your mayor, not someone who just loves the city, but someone who loves the people of our city. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us, Brandon Johnson. It's been a great conversation, and we will be watching. And I want to thank our audience for joining us for Block Club Live, The Ballot. Stay tuned for our next show with Mayor Lori Lightfoot this Friday at 3 p.m. That isn't this coming Friday. You can also check out our website, blockclubchicago.org, for the entire schedule. See you next time, and thanks for watching.